And the tragedy is these are not isolated events. These are the kind of tragedies that we see all too often, and indeed every day, in neighborhoods and streets around our country. So it's important that we come together to talk about the horror of the daily toll of gun violence, and also highlight the horror of the fact that this body and the federal government have not taken action to stop those daily horrors. Mr. President, I want to begin by joining my colleagues in reading out loud the names of 20 of our fellow Americans who have perished from gun violence just this year. 15 from across the country, and 5 from my home state of Maryland. This is this year, and this is just a few of those who've been shut down and shot down through gun violence. Caleb Day of Ohio, age 19. Cody Nichols Campbell of Indiana, age 27. Alex Jackson of New Mexico, age 15. Gregory Dwayne Lynn of Texas, age 32. Deborah Derrick of New Jersey, age 63. Jason B. West of North Carolina, age 36. Jeremiah Lowry of Louisiana, age 17. Caleb Martin of South Carolina, age 18. Levante Sharon Johnson of Virginia, age 23. Holly Elizabeth Beard of Montana, Alabama, March 11th, 21, age 51. Jessica Ruiz of Texas, age 20. Najibat Sewell of Pennsylvania, age 24. Ricardo M. Lopez of New York, age 37. Richard Douglas Sloan of Kentucky, age 33. Tyree Riley of Indiana, age 18. And in Maryland, in my state of Maryland, just this year, April Renee Lawson, age 18. Genesis Garrett, age 22. Terry Williams, age 18. Gann Gersley, age 50. Guy Thomas, age 52. Mr. President, we read these names tonight and remember these lives because it is important to pay tribute to those who we've lost, but it is also to make sure that tonight is not the end of their story and that we dedicate ourselves to turning words into action here in the United States Senate. Our country's now experiencing an upswing in gun violence, the largest increase in gun violence since 1960. Between the years 2019 and 2020, we've seen that big jump. And it should horrify everyone and give us pause and cause us to reflect. Mr. President, I've been texting back and forth in the last few days after the shootings in Atlanta and Boulder with a friend of mine that I first met 2 decades ago. Her name is Carol Price, and I met her under the most tragic of circumstances. Carol and her husband, John, lost their beloved 13-year-old son, John, to gun violence. Their beautiful 13-year-old boy, John, went next door to play at a neighbor's house. There was a loose gun, and it was an accidental shooting. John died. He was 13 years old. Like so many other parents or loved ones of victims of shooting deaths, Carol had the courage to take her pain, take her tragedy, and work to try to make sure that that kind of pain and tragedy didn't happen to another family in the state of Maryland or in the country. But she did what was within her power. At the time, I was in the Maryland legislature, and she came and implored the Maryland legislature to do something, just something, to prevent this kind of horrible tragedy from being experienced by other Maryland families. And the legislature acted. Maryland became the first state in the country at that time to require that guns sold in our state have embedded trigger locks, safety locks, so that if they were left lying around, it'd be less likely that some 13-year-old boy or girl would pick it up and shoot their friend. And that bill saved lives in Maryland. That's because of Carol Price. And you think of what's happening today in our country. The pandemic hit. What did we do? We worked to follow the advice of public health experts, social distance, wear masks, and we went into overdrive to develop a vaccine to stop the deaths. So when it comes to the epidemic of gun violence, we see no such actions being taken here at the federal level. The normal thing to do would be to do what the Maryland State Legislature did in response to that tragedy that Carol Price brought, to try to take some action to prevent other families from experiencing that tragedy. And when Carol texted me the other day, it was just another reminder that the pain of losing a loved one to gun violence never goes away. And in fact, that pain comes back again and again when we see these mass shootings, and it comes back again and again when Carol Price reads about another boy or girl or other person who's died from gun violence in Maryland. Again, we see it on a daily basis. And the reason it's so important that we come together and focus on this is that there are some, I think, in our country who've lost the capacity to be surprised. I know we were all shocked and surprised after Columbine, after Sandy Hook, after the Pulse nightclub, and then the Mother Emanuel AME shooting, maybe the shooting in Las Vegas. We were shocked at some point in the past that people would indiscriminately take the lives of others. We were shocked at the daily toll of gun violence, even if it was in a place like Baltimore, another city in Maryland, that it didn't make the national news. This still was a shocking thing that somebody would just gun down a fellow human being. But now, when we see it happen time and again, mass shootings and the daily toll, nobody can claim surprise. What is surprising is that as a nation, we haven't summoned the will to do something about it, the same way we've worked to summon the will to defeat the coronavirus pandemic. In 2019, 757 Marylanders died from gun violence. In fact, it's become so routine that by this time tomorrow, on the current trajectory, two more Marylanders will have died from gun violence. That's one state out of our 50 states. This is something that tears at the fabric of communities in our country. It has had a disproportionate impact and pain on communities of color. I want to tell my colleagues about Denise Reed, who knows what it's like to carry the burden and pain of losing loved ones to gun violence. Denise grew up in Baltimore. She lost her uncle to gun violence. She lost her cousin to gun violence. She lost her cousin's girlfriend to gun violence. Her mother was shot standing in the doorway of their Baltimore home. Thankfully, she survived. In October 2006, Denise's son, Tavon, was shot and gravely wounded, paralyzed from the neck down. He survived his injury for 3 years, but passed away after that. So tonight, I ask all of us to pay tribute to Denise and her son, Tavon Terrell Water Sr., who's gone too soon. But I want to tell you about Denise, because she is an inspiration to us all. She still lives in Baltimore. She works as the chaplain with the Baltimore City Police, working every day to serve her community and give back to the city she loves but wants to make better and safer. My state of Maryland has thankfully joined Denise and Carol Price and all those who have lost someone to gun violence by passing common sense measures in our state of Maryland. But the state of Maryland, like every other state, is not an island. We can't do it alone. We need for the Congress to take action. If you look at guns that are used in Maryland in crimes, 54% of them come from outside of the state of Maryland, from states that do not have those kind of common sense gun laws that make people safer. And so Maryland, like so many other states, is calling upon our brothers and sisters from across the union to help us take action. And we know that the public believes and understands that too. Some of my colleagues have said 90% of the American public supports basic background checks for people purchasing guns. I want to tell my colleagues about Michael Derek Bond, who was born March 18th, 1983, excelled in school throughout his life. He went to college in Maryland, then he moved to Delaware. His mother, Cheryl, remembers picking up the phone one day and hearing her son at the other end of the line saying, "Mom, I went to Walmart and got a gun in 15 minutes. I can't get a driver's license that fast, but I got a gun because I'm feeling pain and I have a gun to my head." Cheryl and Michael spoke on the phone for 2 hours before Michael agreed to take the bullets out of his gun. But that wasn't the last time that he made an attempt, and Michael died of suicide, gunshot, February 2014. Mr. President, whether it's the ease of getting a gun to commit suicide or the ease of getting a gun to shoot down others, what we have in the country today is simply unacceptable. As Daniel Webster, who's a public health researcher at Johns Hopkins University in Maryland, has said, gun violence is not inevitable. It's very preventable. We know that. We know there are things we can do to prevent gun violence. Mr. President, I'm not going to go into a litany of legislation that we could pass to make things better. I do want to point out, though, that we have an organization, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF as it's commonly referred to, whose job it is, who's charged with protecting the public from the illegal use and trafficking of firearms. And yet, while we give them that charge, we give them that responsibility, The House and the Senate over the years have tied up their hands. We've handcuffed them. We've made it very difficult for them to do their job. We prevent them from sharing trace crime data on firearms with the public and on people doing research into the gun violence epidemic. We bar the ATF from legally requiring gun dealers to keep accurate inventories of their guns and report lost or stolen firearms. Simple things like that we say they can't do. Mr. President, I want to end by talking about an initiative of the mayor of Baltimore City, Mayor Brandon Scott, who's worked with Every Town, the organization, to create a cutting-edge internal system to help law enforcement track and understand and disrupt the stream of firearms entering the city of Baltimore. And they've worked hard to try to overcome these obstacles that we put in the way of ATF. But that's a challenge, and it shouldn't be so hard. We had a program in the city of Baltimore, still do. It's called Safe Streets. It's headed by a person called Dante Barksdale. He went by the name of Tatter, known throughout Baltimore as the smiling face of Safe Streets, which was a gun violence prevention program. Dante was committed to the mission. He helped others learn to put down their guns. Dante was shot to death on January 17th of this year. In that moment, Maryland lost a son, a mentor, a hero, as Mayor Scott called him, a man who saved thousands of lives in our city, thousands of lives. And yet his was taken by gun violence that's preventable. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Senator from New Jersey.
Member after member has come down tonight to speak. And the conversations, as we all have come down,